Welcome to Interactive Futures. I'm really pleased that you've joined us. This session is all around pitching for investment for your creative business. Now, it's really important for creative businesses to seek investment, and we're really pleased to have a panel of experts to kind of guide you through this session. My name is Claire Green and I work for the University of Warwick. I head up a creative and digital communities initiative here, and I also lead an incubator which is based at 1 Mill Street, where I am at the moment. Now, we are really keen to encourage businesses, creative businesses, to start and grow their business within Leamington Spa and Coventry and Warwickshire. Now, today I'm really pleased to be joined by a whole range of speakers. First up is Alex Toft, who is from Minerva Business Angels as part of the University of Warwick Science Park. We also have Steve Stops, who's the founder of Promotion, and Irene Graham from the Scale Up Institute. Now, they will be delivering short presentations to take you through some useful information around getting your business ready to pitch and seek investment. Now, I'll hand over first to Alex, then Steve, then Irene. Alex, do you want to go ahead?
Okay. Just about to share a screen. Oops, wrong one. This is where you find out you've got too many things open in Hoover. Okay. No, apologies. It's not picking up the one I wanted to pick up. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Don't
Anyway,
worry at all.
I'll have to talk to it anyway. So apologies, I have a presentation produced, but it's just not been picked up by the program. So let me tell you about pitching first. So one of the most important things really when it comes to pitching, it's about you. It's about nobody else in many respects, but you and your team and the idea that you've got. And one of the problems we face as investors, because I head up Minerva Business Angels, which is principally the Midlands-based angel network. If anything, it's the only Midlands-based angel network. And when we get people coming to us, invariably they're not taking it professionally approach. They're not seeing it as a customer. They're seeing it as a necessary evil. So frequently they don't come to us very prepared. They don't understand the process. They don't really understand what's required. And although we have lots of incubators and accelerators in terms of getting ready for investor readiness, it's really, in many respects, poorly educated. And the reason for that is that the only people that are really going to teach you how to get investment ready are investors themselves. And that's the particular demand that they need. So what do I need to do to become investment ready? Well, first of all, I've got to have an idea, an opportunity that I want to take forward. And that opportunity has to be reasonably unique. For example, in the creative sector, it has to be a specific game. It's not something that's done before. If it's in the film industry, I mean, the one that's been pointed out to me is where the one where they have a competition with the naked people, and that's apparently come out of a local opportunity. So it has to be something that's unique. So what does that mean? Well, you're going to think it unique, but you're going to have a look around the marketplace to find out whether it is unique. And then people come to us and they don't understand the competition, and people think that, well, this is something really, really good. But do they know the competition? Have they opened their eyes to the competition? We're so used to seeing things in the right-hand side of the graph showing how good and special they are. So yeah, understand your competition, because one of the first things I'm going to ask is, do you need your competition? And what can your competition do? What can you do better than competition? And then the next thing is that, well, this is a great idea, fantastic, really love it if it's new. Well, are you sure the market needs it? What evidence do you have that the market needs it and it's there for you? I mean, and that's another challenge that you've got to come to the table with. So we've got this proposition, you've checked it out, you believe you've got some validation. So what is validation? People say, validation, what does that mean? Validation means sales, for example. Do you have sales? But I don't have any money. How am I going to do it? Well, that's what we get the family, friends, and fools stage. So those are the people who are going to put some early money into you, who like you, know you, and going to get you off your ground. You might even have a startup loan. So I'm going to do that. So what else am I going to do? Well, if I'm going to go to the investors, I need to get investment ready. So what does that mean? Well, it means I've got to put a presentation together in around 10 minutes that's going to describe what I do, what I'm going to achieve, how I'm going to achieve it, how much money I'm going to make, how I'm going to make that money, how am I going to deliver it, how am I going to get over the barriers and obstacles to deliver it. And more importantly, I'm going to make you money, you and Mr. Investor. Because if it's a lifestyle business, what's a lifestyle business? They can be described many different ways. And groceries is a lifestyle business. It can be a business whereby, for example, a couple make a good living out of it, but not really going to take anywhere. So lifestyle business is a business that's not really going to go anywhere other than keep those founders in a job. And if you want investment to do that, then don't go to an investor community, because they want to see the return of their money at the end of that. So why do they want a return? Well, firstly, they want to not only a return, they want to give you their expertise, their input, their facilities, their knowledge, help you to grow. But if they get an exit and they make some profit out of that exit, they don't just stick it under the bed or go and buy a new house or go and renovate the house they've got at the moment. They invariably will reinvest into you and other businesses. Because when you come to an investor for money, first time around, there's probably going to be a second and a third, maybe in a fourth time. And we know that. And because we know that, then we've got to be careful how we've got the money. So in the middles, it is difficult to raise. We see far more polished propositions from the south of the country than we do from basically further north. And that's because we don't take it as seriously. We don't look at it as professional. We don't look at it as it's not a customer. We don't realize, and it's called risk capital. Risk capital is money people put in you because it risk. We don't look at it as though it's an important part of our development, our customer base, the growth of our company, how we grow ourselves. So take it there. So what you've got to look at, so you've looked at the competition, you've looked at the idea, you've got some evidence that you can show it's needed, and then you've got to decide how much it's worth. And it's called a valuation. So what's a valuation? It's anything. Stick your finger in the air and guess. Oh, not quite. Well, that's what people do. And it can be a big killer if you come, well, I don't want to give away 10% of my company, so I know you're $1 million, I'm going to value it at 10 million. And that means, even though I haven't got anything, it's only 10%. But you're not giving it 10% away, you're gaining. So you've got to be realistic, and setting yourself a value for your company is an important part of your investment journey. And how do you do that? Well, you've got to look around, you've got to take advice, discuss it with other people, discuss it with potential people who may be interested in investing. But it's one of the things that we're seeing at the moment after COVID, which is one of the biggest killers. And that is valuations are ridiculous. So what's ridiculous? To give you some sort of benchmarking, an early startup with some evidence of traction, some evidence of sales, a good proposition, maybe even some intellectual property, that could be a patent, that would be looking around the $1 million, $1.5 million mark. So it's got some good traction. It then goes on to get some good sales, and it's got a turnover about $1 million a year. Well, that only might be 2 or 3 million valuation. I mean, some come along and say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You know, I don't believe you, that's stupid, you can't see it. And that's a common problem in terms of where we sit. And when you come forward to discussing your business proposition, have you thought about talking to your granny or your mum about it? People say, well, why would I do that? What's that all about? Well, if they don't understand it, how do you think investors are? So you can be so close to the flame that you don't understand it. So you might say, well, I only want specialist investors like Steve. He's a special investor. He knows what he's talking about, but he's only one. You might, I very much think there's half a dozen of Steve's, although he's fantastic. So Steve's going to have to bring other people to the party with him, and you're going to have to bring other people to the party with him. And you're going to have to educate those people in terms of their ability to understand your proposition. So we say, keep it stupid, keep it simple. So what are the tips for a successful pitch? First of all, practice. Think about what you're saying. Saying it with pictures rather than words is important. Imagine you're talking to a 16-year-old who's slightly deaf. Always helps. It's reasonably intelligent, but you've got to get your point across. The other thing is, be prepared for the questions, know your numbers. But I'm not financially based. Well, yeah, but you need to learn in your business planning those financial numbers. Have a business plan. Have some idea of a detailed forecast. We all see the hockey sticks rising through the air. That's common. We all accept that. And it doesn't matter if you haven't got the best thing since sliced bread. What it matters is that you are believable and we can believe in you. And part of that is your team. So make sure who your team are, your team work together. And as part of your investment journey, try to pick those investors that are going to fit with your team. However, never turn down money, because sometimes if you turn down money, it never comes around again. So it's a balance in that respect. So what else can I do? Make sure it's simple what you're telling people. Make sure you tell the truth. People don't understand it. If you stand up and tell people a load of baloney, it's actually an offence because it's misrepresentation and you're obtaining money. So we make sure you detail what you've got, you know your facts, and you can validate and prove whatever you're saying. And then lastly, listen to your audience. We're not Americans. We don't expect you to come in and say, I'm going to conquer the world, save humanity and cure peace. We want people who will listen to our advice, take our advice, and benefit from our advice. And that's what we're really looking for. And what I will do is, with the organisers, I'll make that presentation available, which will detail all this in great detail, so you can have it, share it. So who are Minerva? Well, we started in '94 as part of the University of Warwick Science Park. So we've made it over 129 investments and invested 25 million, which has helped raise 73 million. How's that work? Well, 100,000 from us during COVID released 400,000. So we've helped 2 million be invested. And we're Midlands based, we're here for the Midlands. So what we try to do as well is we try to create a digital and creative specialist angel group. Steve has worked with us a little bit on that, and we need to do a lot more work. And by that, we're trying to bring those specialists around us to help support the digital and creative industry within our region. And more importantly, with Leamington Spa and the gaming industry, what a wealth of expertise that we're hoping to tap into. It's not easy, these things take time, but that's what we're trying to do. So on that, I think I've taken my time per se, and I'll pass over to Claire as the chair.
Thank you so much, Alex. I just had one question. How would people engage with Minerva in terms of kind of registering their business, and if they're seeking investment, how do they start their journey with you?
Okay, so what we have is minerva.uk.net is the route into us, but we do have some, should we say, lines in the sand. We need to consider businesses where there is some evidence that of proof that the business is needed. So if you've got an idea, for us, you're too early. So what we like to say is something that's on the point of commercialization or has some commercialization. And by that, I mean some evidence that it's needed. Or it can come from a very experienced team. What we can't support is just ideas. And one of the problems we've had is that we've invested in a lot of early startups, and what people don't realize, they can take 10 to 14 years before they exit. And what that means is your investors, after doing 25 investments, dry up, and you've got to keep refreshing your pool. So what we need to find also is those investments that are closer to exit, as well as those who are startups. So any business where you believe that you've got a good idea, you've got some evidence that it's wanted, you've got some validation that it's needed, we'll have a look at you. But again, if it's just an idea, we're too early.
Perfect, thank you so much. And we'll be taking questions. So if you've got any questions for any of our panelists today, then you can add them to the Q&A part, and we'll be around afterwards to answer those questions. Thank you so much, Alex. We are now going to hear from Steve. So if you want to share your screen, Steve.
I will try and do that, yeah. There you go. Hopefully that is up. Hi, I'm Steve Stops, and I've kind of been on all of the sides of the games industry. So I used to work for a large work for hire studio pitching for work, So deals worth between $1 and $15 million. I ran my own small studio where we had 3 rounds of commercial investment, and I now work with publishers and larger studios where we're investing in game projects. I've kind of seen all of the different sides. And actually, when I looked through the stuff that Alex was going to run through, I thought there's no point me talking about the details of how to put a pitch and the information you need, because Alex has absolutely nailed it. And it's the thing that I think across our industry is people always think the video games is unique, and it is, and I'll run through some of that uniqueness. But actually, how you pitch for investment is the same, because investors are ultimately looking at, can I trust you with my money, and am I likely to get my money back and a return? And once you answer those things, you're pretty much in. And so the format you go through to do that is pretty much universal, regardless of industry. So I thought, I've called this random thoughts. But what I thought is I'd fill in some of the other details that aren't necessarily so obvious, things that are specific to our industry and things that I see people falling down in their thinking. The thing that Alex mentioned about that that commercial thinking, the professionalism, where sometimes the games pitches can let themselves down. So let's see, hopefully this works. So one of the first things to think about, and this is, I thought I'd cover some specifics and then some general things, is the first one is how a game's actually funded. A lot of people don't even begin to understand, and there are really kind of 4 main routes to funding games. The first one, and probably the most common, is Beans and Weetabix. Probably not Beans and Weetabix, but it's developers who have got a great idea and they're passionate about their idea and they just want to make it. So they either quit their day job and make it and work and self-finance their game, or they keep their day job and work on weekends and evenings and create their game in their own time. And I would suggest that's the most common way. Most of the games I'm seeing releasing nowadays haven't had commercial investment, don't work with a publisher, haven't had grant funding. They're just passion projects made by developers, which is fine. Some of those go on to be incredibly successful. I've had some friends who've managed to launch entire studios off the back of projects they've created in their weekends and evenings. But there is a cost associated with that. You're giving up your time, and we'll talk about where you need to think about that in a minute. So that's probably, I would suggest, as many as 80% of the games I'm seeing released nowadays are self-funded. The next one, I've got a stern picture of Donald Trump because I typed in businessman, and oddly, this is the first thing that came up was a picture of Donald Trump. And this is where Alex is. This is commercial investment. And I would say it's still in its infancy in video games. There are studios who've had commercial investment from commercial funds, and there are some specialist funds like Hero and some others that work specifically with the games industry. But here's the thing, people, when they're investing in a business, yes, they need a great team. Yes, they will care that your idea is good, but ultimately they just want to make sure they're going to get a return on their investment. They're not putting in because they like you and love you and want to be nice. They're putting money in to see a return. And I see so often things where I hear investors say, oh, I just want to get involved in the games industry. Yeah, they do, but they don't want you to take their money and just set fire to it. They're going to want a return. And I often see this when people say, oh, I'm just going to have a silent partner. I'm not going to be involved in it. I'm just going to put money in. I'm passionate about being in the games industry. Until they see their money looking like it's unlikely to get a return, then they'll be all over you like a rash. So it's really important to understand the expectations of commercial investors coming in. Where I sit mostly nowadays is a slightly smiley business person. Is on the publisher side. Like the benefit of publishers, they're threefold. Publishers aren't just putting money into your business, they're putting money into a specific game project. So whereas an investor may be investing in you as a team in the long term, like Alex said, maybe looking to 10, 15 years down the line, publishers working with you on one specific game. They can see there's an opportunity for that game, and that's what they'll do. And they'll support you around that game. And we'll talk about how some of these are layering up a bit more. Like more investors I'm finding are looking to invest in teams that have a publisher assigned to their project because we fulfill different roles. Like the commercial investor can help you with the commercial side of the business, and the publisher can help you with getting that game out to market, finding the audience for your game and helping your game sell, and they complement really well. But it's understanding where that money's coming from and the expectations. And the fourth route that I hear about a lot is grant funding. I'm always hearing that there's free money, like, oh, there's a new government initiative, there's free money coming into your game. Pigs might fly. I've yet to find one of those that is actually useful, because as a games business, 90% of our cost of making a game we don't need tooling, we don't need warehousing, we don't need those things. We basically need a person and a computer, and 90% of the cost of making a video game is in the salary of the person, so they can afford to buy their Weetabix and beans whilst they're sat at their desk making the game. And the important thing to think about with that is most government funding won't fund salaries. It will fund reports into how the creative industry is going to succeed. It will fund potentially new kit for you and physical hardware. It very rarely will cover your salary. So I've yet to find, and then when you look through the terms, you'll start to find things like, and they'll get to approve every press release you ever do, and you have to mention them in every. Be careful with grant funding. I've yet to find the source that is a really viable source that will help you fund your game. Doesn't come with strings that are too onerous. So don't get too excited when you hear people talking about free money. Nothing in this life is free. So once you understand the kinds of investment, you can then start to think about where you might sit and how your project might sit. And the other thing that I think people forget to think about at that point is what's important to them as a developer. Like Alex said, never turn away money. And I broadly agree with that, but sometimes you do need to walk away from money because you need to understand what's important to you as a developer and how that's going to work within your game. So I have this simple metric, which is the less money you take, the more creative freedom and the more creative control you have. The more money you take from people, the more you're going to have to compromise your creative vision. And I say this as an important thing because I see it all too often. So someone might sign a deal with a publisher and then start resenting the fact that publisher wants feedback into their game idea. They're like, it's my game, it's my passion project. How dare you give me feedback about a game? But as a publisher, we're putting money in because we want to see commercial success of the game. And if the developer's taking the game in a direction we don't think is going to help the commercial success, we're going to want to have feedback on that. And if the developer starts to refuse to listen to that feedback, we'll stop giving them money. It's a really simple equation, right? So if you want complete creative control over your project, don't get outside money involved. Fund it yourself, work out how you're going to do it, and take your beautiful idea as an artistic expression of your personal identity out to market yourself without taking commercial money. Because the more money you take to get it to market, the less you're going to be able to ensure that matches your overall vision. And it's a really important thing. Understand that compromise and think about it, and understand the different levels of money, whether it's a business person investing in your game who doesn't understand the industry, or a publisher investing in your game who understands the industry, and what pool they're going to want over that creative freedom. One of my things is, if you've got a project that's been in the back of your mind for a decade and this is now your opportunity to work on it, do that with your own money, because you're not going to enjoy someone interfering with your creative concept. So be careful, be aware of that stuff. The other one that bugs me a bit is you don't win investment. Like, people often say, oh, I've won investment. You don't, you earn investment because someone thinks there's going to be a return on what they're investing in. It's not a win. And actually, the getting the investment is the beginning of the journey, not the end. Like, I see people celebrating as if that's it, it's the live happily ever after. But what you've now entered into is a legally binding contract with someone who's given you a large amount of money, who wants to see a return on that money. So that's when the journey begins, not ends. And it's why it's so important that when you're working with your investor, like a job interview is a two-way thing, where you need to be happy that that's the company you want to work with, and they need to be happy that you're the best fit for their company. You need the same with an investor, because you're talking, like Alex said earlier, this could be a 10-year relationship, and they're putting money into your business for the long term. So you need to make sure that you understand that, and you've met a partner who understands what you're trying to do, and you understand what they're trying to get out of the relationship, and then you can work together. And it's the same with a publisher investment. It might only be for one game, but if you are not aligned on what your goals are, then problems are going to occur. And that takes me neatly on to the next one, which is get a lawyer. Like, it always upsets me if I send a publishing contract to a developer, they read it and go, yep, that's all good, signed. My alarm bells start ringing, because what that means to me is they've not read the contract, because there's stuff in that contract they should be questioning, and probably some things in the contract they should ask for amending in our boilerplate contract. And if they're not asking those questions and they're not going through it, means they've probably not read it, which means everything's going to be fine until they start getting their first payments under their royalty, and they've not really understood how royalties work. That's a common one I see. Like, Most publisher contracts will have a recoup clause where the publisher gets to recoup the amount of money they've spent on marketing, for example. And then you send an update to the publisher and you say, oh, I want this to go out. Can you test it? And they go, yep, we will add 10 grand testing costs onto your contract, onto your recoup before you get any money. And you're like, what? That's not right. Yeah, it's in the contract. And it's so important. Like, I'm much happier if I've had lengthy negotiations with a developer where they've gone through the contract with a fine-tooth comb, pointed out the problems, because I know that when we both sign it, we both understand it. And I know that we're then not going to hit new problems in the future. But human beings can't read legal very well. It's written to be dense. It's written to make lawyers money. So like, nearly every company, here's my pro tip number one, every company I've ever set up, every company I've ever had investment, I've given a lawyer a 5% stake in our company. So they'll review all my legal stuff for free in the hope that one day we'll make them rich and they'll get some return on it. It's like an insurance policy. It pays for itself. Find good lawyers and work with them, make them friends. One of my best friends is a lawyer. And then another one that Alex said, and I want to provide some meat on the bones for the games industry about this, is understand the market, like properly understand the market. Lots of people say, oh yeah, I understand the games market. Do you really? Can you really give me an accurate forecast on how much money your game's going to make? And you'll say to me, no, that's impossible. It's not impossible. Like, I give you some simple things now. I'm a simple person. I like to have some simple numbers in my head. So here's some numbers. These are like free available on the internet, bit of Googling, you find the stuff. So overall, this is where investors get really excited. This is a number that starts to get investors excited. Yeah. Overall, global value of the games industry, this is from 2018, so it's like nearly 3 years old, was $116 billion. So that's more than film or television. And in fact, last year, that number is more than film, television, video, and music combined. Like, I think the total value of the games industry forecast this year is about 180 billion. So more than all of those. It's why I call those like legacy industries, and everyone gets upset with me. But this is where the investors get really excited. They're like, I've seen how much money these games make. I've seen how much money Fortnite makes. Where do I give you some money so I can make those returns? But let's have a little look at the industry in a bit more detail. So next thing to think about is what platforms are making which amount of money. So as a general rule, if you divide the games industry as a whole into quarters, 2 quarters, so half of that industry is mobile. And from the 2 quarters that are left, a quarter's PC and a quarter's console. So as a really quick way of thinking about it, half the games industry revenue comes from mobile, a quarter comes from PC, a quarter comes from console. So if you're pitching to an investor for a PC game, you're already pitching for just a small slice of that pie. The amount of developers who don't even think about working in mobile still after all of these years, probably with good reason, which we'll see in a second. If you look at the growth of the industry, like the reason the games industry has grown so much over the last few years is the growth in mobile. You can kind of see, if you look at the pale blue bar at the bottom, that's console. It stayed pretty constant for the last few years, and that's about 20% of total games industry. PC, again, stayed pretty constant. That size of that market has stayed around the same revenue baseline year on year for quite some time now. All of the growth is in mobile. When you look at where that's positioned in the world, again, Steve's simple little numbers, half the revenue of the industry comes from Asia and China. Now, of what that's left, a quarter, half of that comes from Europe and half comes from America. There's a simple way of thinking about it. Again, so if your concept isn't going to embrace Asia, you already lost half the potential global market for your game. So if you're doing a game about panda torture, that isn't going to get through the Chinese legislatures. So you've just cut your market significantly as a result of that. But then I see people go, well, we're going to be huge in China. You go, great. What's your plan for getting through the Chinese government approval process? It takes 9 months and normally needs a Chinese partner. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Know the market properly, understand how you're going to reach those markets. And then the final one, and the really kind of scary one. So this is, notice the words here. So this is free-to-play games with the highest grossing month. This isn't total lifetime value. This is just 1 month. Look at the top, Fortnite, free-to-play game in 1 month made 318 million. from mobile. And this is where most of that growth, when you look at that chart and that mobile growth isn't in paid games, it's in free-to-play games. And most of the revenue growth that you'll see in that chart comes from free-to-play. So if you're making a paid PC game, you're already that's only going to target Europe and North America, you're hitting such a tiny piece of that market already. You really shrunk your market size. So this is what Alex was saying earlier. You know, when you put your pitch in, you say, right, I want $250 million because I'm making this amazing game, and here's my target market. And we look at it and go, that's probably a revenue of $10,000. Then all of a sudden you can see where those things start to disjoints happen. And it's where my kind of penultimate point comes in, which is success bias. This is something I say all the time. I speak to so many developers who tell me how they're working on the next big game, and then they tell me what the game idea is, and I immediately know it's unlikely to be the next big game. And the reason for that is, despite all of the growth we've seen in the market industry, if you look at, say, a platform like Steam, average revenue for a really well-crafted game on Steam at the moment is about $10,000. And that's a game that probably costs upwards of $150,000 to make. So the average developer releasing a game on Steam at the moment is likely to make $100,000 loss. You know, just a brutal fact of the market. But no developers I've seen speak to who are making PC games seem to understand this. Some really top tips in understanding what that market size is. So SteamDB has loads of back-end data which will show you Steam traffic, how many players are playing on a particular game on a particular day, how much Twitch traffic that game's had, and also really usefully how many followers that game's got. And the number of followers directly index links to the amount of success that game has. So this is, I just went in just before this and looked on tomorrow, and these are all the games releasing on the 17th of February according to SteamDB, and it tells you the amount of followers. And I can tell you that if you watch these games, and you can do this, here's a fun thing, pick some of the games on the list, wait until next Tuesday, and then see how many reviews they've got. And the amount of reviews will pretty much link to how many sales they've got. So about 5% of people on average leave a review. So if you multiply the number of reviews by 20, that will tell you how many units a game sold. And I can tell you, if you look at the link between the amount of followers before launch and the amount of reviews after launch, there's a direct correlation. If you want a game to make more than $100,000, that game will need at launch over 5,000 followers. So you can see, I can see already, you can see you've got 3 games that have got between 3,000 and 6,000 followers. They're probably going to do all right. Hopefully their development budgets weren't much more than 150, 200,000. Anything below that is probably not going to make that much money. Anything that's below 1,000 is unlikely to make more than $10,000. And if you look at the amount of followers, if you go on SteamDB and do this, you'll see that accounts for most of the games on Steam. And this is what I mean when I say success bias. The amount of developers who don't understand how tough the market has become. And that's simply because of the amount of games releasing on Steam. When I first released a game on Steam, going back probably 15 years, something like that, there were 15 indie games released that year on Steam. Last year, there were over 8,000. It's simple fact that the market's saturated. That saturation means it's much harder to get visibility, which therefore means it's harder to make any money selling your game. And this is kind of the last point, really, which is why it's worth thinking about publishers and investors. This is the value of publisher ads to your product. We're looking at the market all of the time. It's almost like if you look at the average revenue for a game with a publisher makes versus without a publisher, it's about at least 30% higher with a publisher. That's the bottom line value. And that's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we're looking at the market so long, we'll only sign games that we think have a chance of making it. So we're kind of self-selecting the ones that are likely to be more successful already. But then we also know the platforms. We've got more time. Like, developers are notoriously busy making games. It's hard to make games. It takes a lot of time and effort. Whereas a publisher, all we do is look on the platforms, understand which opportunities, understand how to create visibility for your game and get your game in front of people. And a really nice graph that I, again, stole off SteamDB. This is a game that I'm working with at the moment. You can see, here's the game up until the point we signed it, and there's the game after we signed it. And you can see the amount of followers going up And that's the work we create by being a publisher and creating visibility. And so my last little point here really is, this is why what we're seeing nowadays is publishers and investors. We're seeing investors investing in the company and helping the company be financially stable. And then we're seeing the publisher coming in, working with them to help that product reach its market and going out. So hopefully that's useful, and hopefully it provides some of that context for the games industry around the good information Alex provided earlier.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. We do have a question in the chat in Hoover, so maybe if we head over there at the end of the session and to answer that. But it's really interesting in terms of making sure that you've got a good idea, but also that you're ready with your followers, with your kind of pitch, and also kind of seeking the right support. So I'm going to hand over now to Irene from the Scale Up Institute. We'll hopefully talk about the right support and where to get it.
Thanks, and just to thank everybody for being here today and trying to just sort of summarise maybe what our fellow contributors have just gone through, and for you guys and girls in the games and creative industry. I mean, firstly, the important thing to say is you are in a very key industry sector for the country. The creative sector adds about 111 billion to the UK every year, and contributes, I think, around 12.5 million every day. So that's really important. The other bit to recognise is that on this investment journey, we track the scale-up businesses that are running around the country and how many are there. And we see around 1,600 that have reached over 10 million plus in revenue and opportunities. And those businesses between them contribute 43 billion to the UK economy, and around about overall in terms of their fundraising, they've raised a considerable amount of funds as well through the activity that they bring. And it's important for you all knowing here that there is the opportunity to raise money. Around 4 billion has been raised by the creative sector, who are scale-ups in this last 12 months. So that's a really encouraging factor and knowledge base. And as Steve has said, when you look at it from a point of view of the gaming sector as a whole, it's going to be valued in 3 years. I think the gaming business sector as a whole will be 250 billion globally, of which expectations are in the next 3 years in the UK that will be worth 5 billion here in the UK. And you in Leamington Spa are one of our key cluster areas for the games industry. You're third in the country overall, but actually if you combine Slough and Heathrow into London, you become second in the country. It's an interesting dynamic that Slough and Heathrow has some very interesting gaming businesses, but Leamington Spa is absolutely right up there, 100 million being contributed in turnover every year. So you've got good ingredients there in the clusters and in the people that you have. When you approach the aspect of raising money, one of the things we find with our creative businesses is you can get equity, and I think risk capital is the important point here. It's not necessarily bank debt or debt, but risk capital. So finding the right angel investors, venture capitalists and crowdfunders, all of whom are investing in the creative sector, is vital. But we also know from yourselves, and it's why today's very important, that as businesses in the creative sector, you don't always know where to look. You don't necessarily understand who are the different investors, what type of investment is right, and on what stage of the investment. I think, you know, Steve made a very good point. When you take one lot of investment, you're actually going to probably need follow-on investment as well. And how does that develop and grow? We've been talking to investors about the creative sector and their interest in the creative sector. I think a couple of things just to reinforce the points that Alex has made and Steve is they want to invest in the creative sector, but they want to see the role of technology platforms and scalability as they assess a business they're investing in. Investors are very keen on digital media, content and gaming. They're very popular sectors to invest in. If you're in some of the fashion or craft industry, you might find it harder to raise investment, and be aware of that as you move into this opportunity of talking to investors for funding. There's several things that the three things that you've heard today that investors say they're always looking for. Is this proposition scalable? Is it commercial? And are you as individuals in the business ready to take on the investments that's needed? As well as recognizing they want to understand better about the actual sector itself and the opportunities, which is why I think, again, the next session we're looking at is the investor opportunity. So to summarize in terms of what our colleagues have said, and maybe just bringing together the two speeches that have just gone ahead, and hopefully we're at slide 9 now in the deck overall, Richard. I think there is absolutely the criticality of you need to do your homework. You need to be prepared. You need to know what's happening in your sector, but also in the investor sector, and join sessions like this. You need to be absolutely clear on that commercial proposition. Who are what's the market? What's the customers? What's the costs? What's the revenue? Where will you get scale from? You know, what is the proposition today, but where can it go to? Where will that scale come from? And how will you tech enable what you're doing and take that to the next level? It's very clear that support is needed. Now, Steve's talked about the advisors and the lawyers, but there's also the mentors, the networks that you can join, and the programs that can support you. And I would absolutely reinforce what Steve said about you want to know what your investors are going to bring you beyond money. If they're the right investor, they should help you with building out your team, getting into new markets, and supporting you on your journey of growth. So as much as they're selecting you, you are choosing them. And so be clear about those investors that are going to make the best possible opportunity for you as well, and not be recognizing of that. In terms of support programs, you've got the Creative Scale Up program that's there on the doorstep in the environment of the Midlands, and looking for further businesses to come forward to that. You've got what the universities are offering in Coventry and Warwickshire overall. You've got the Finance Hub of the British Business Bank, which is really helpful in assessing the different types of finance, which we've all sort of talked around today, but that's a really good educational tool. And there's a range of other programs that we assess that can help you on your investor journey, whether it's looking at the opportunities to join a peer-to-peer group with Vistage, or being part of TechNation's programs, or Goldman Sachs. There's a whole range of those that can help you as you think through your business dynamics, both locally and also across the country. And don't be afraid to put yourselves forward for that and take those up. So I'll stop there. That's a summary from our side, and hopefully summarising some of the key points that Alex and Steve have also covered.
Excellent, thank you so much. This has been an extremely informative session. We are going to do a session now for investors. So if you are looking to invest in the area in creative and digital businesses, then stay on for the next session. But thank you so much for joining us, Alex, Steve, and Irene.